on dispensaries, while requiring them to be at least 1,000 feet apart.
Regardless of which of those options voters approve in May, Councilmember Mitchell Englander is against the possibility of reopening dispensaries previously shut down by the city. He says once they're shut down, they should remain shut down.
I don't think anything that's been opened, certainly that has been closed down by the feds or by local law enforcement because of issues they've had, criminal activity, selling other narcotics or guns and all kinds of other issues, that they have a right to reopen.
While Councilman Bill Rosendahl, who uses marijuana to battle cancer, says he's grateful the options allow many existing dispensaries to remain in business.
We're moving in the right direction. We will go forward with this. There's been a lot of discussions, but frankly, it'll still be up to the courts and to the federal government to make the final ruling.
In downtown L.A., Gil Reyes for L.A. This Week.
Those measures will be up for a vote on the May 21st city elections. But before the May elections, there is a March election, and the city clerk is in need of poll workers to help out during both. Yana Kay has more.
As voters head to the polls for the upcoming municipal elections on March 5th and May 21st, the city clerk is asking for additional poll workers to staff polling places to help greet and process voters.
If you are a person who likes to mingle with your neighbors, you want to be out there getting to know the voting process, we definitely want to hear from you.
The Election Division's Senior Project Coordinator Maria Garcia said the office is looking for 6,300 people who are social and who can speak, read, and write English.
To become a poll worker, the process is fairly simple. You'll first go through a couple of hours of training, and then you'll show up at the polling place on election day to get your assignment. Now, one poll worker says the experience is worthwhile.
It's always fulfilling, just being able to process people that come in that are anxious or eager to vote, and we just try to make them feel welcome.
Officials would also prefer poll workers who are bilingual in Armenian, Spanish, Chinese, Hindi, Korean, Thai, Vietnamese, and Tagalog. Poll workers will receive a stipend for their time. It's one day of work to see democracy in action. I'm Yana Kay for LA This Week.
To apply, you can call the Election Division's Poll Worker Recruitment Hotline toll-free at 866-899-VOTE or locally at 213-978-0363. You can also find an application online by going to cityclerk.lacity.org/election and clicking on the Poll Worker Information section. It's been 100 years since a pivotal event changed the course of Los Angeles, the completion of the Los Angeles Aqueduct. To commemorate this historic event, the City Council is declaring 2013 the year of the LA Aqueduct. The Los Angeles City Council joins the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power in launching a year-long celebration of William Mulholland's great engineering achievement that brought water from Owens Valley, 233 miles away, to L.A. 100 years ago.
When the city was founded in San Gabriel in 1781, 44 people walked 9 miles. And where did they stop, Jim? They stopped on what would be the Los Angeles River because they needed water. And water is what made the city grow.
City leaders credit the Los Angeles Aqueduct, completed in 1913, for defining the modern era of Los Angeles and with the growth and prosperity of Southern California.
The connection of the Transcontinental Railroad with the spur that connected Los Angeles to the Transcontinental Railroad and the opening of this aqueduct. And were it not for those two things, we would continue to be a tiny little backwater village south of San Francisco.
But history had other plans for Los Angeles. Today, the LADWP serves 600 million gallons of drinking water every single day to a population of over 4 million people. But thanks to conservation, stormwater capture, water recycling, and groundwater cleanup, aqueduct water is less than half of our water supply today.
Water is our history, but it is also our future, which is why we as a council and as a city are committed to responsible stewardship of this precious resource.
While William Mulholland famously said back in 1913 of the water running down the aqueduct, there it is, take it. His great-granddaughter, who was on hand in council chambers for the centennial celebration, says she sees this milestone as a way to continue educating the public about this most precious resource.
To remind people from where the water comes and the costs to bring it, treat it, and deliver it, and the tremendous responsibility to conserve and never waste it.
The Los Angeles Aqueduct Centennial, with the theme Our Legacy, Our Future, includes events, activities, and a public awareness campaign. There will also be a celebration on November 5th to mark 100 years to the day when a crowd of 40,000 gathered at the northeast end of the San Fernando Valley to witness the first flow of water down the Cascades. Revitalization efforts continue in downtown Los Angeles as officials begin construction on a new apartment complex in hopes of bringing more people to downtown. Yana Kay has more.
This backhoe is about to dig into the dirt, making way for a new high-rise residential tower in the Bunker Hill area of downtown Los Angeles. Related California, the developers of the site, along with city and county officials, broke ground recently on what will be the first residential building of the developer's Grand Avenue project.
Today's ceremony marks a continuation of the journey to a more lively and a more vital downtown.
The tower, which will be built as a rectangular prism accentuated by walls of glass and windows, is located at 225 North Grand Avenue between 2nd and 3rd Streets, across from Metro's planned station and next door to the Broad, a new museum that's under construction.
There is no more exciting place to be than downtown LA.
It took about 8 years and the collaborative efforts of the city and county to get to this groundbreaking.
I really feel that we can be part of something that's transformational on Bunker Hill. And that's, at the end of the day, going to be the test of this project. And I think it will pass the test.
The 19-story apartment tower will cost $120 million to build, will have 271 apartments, and will feature 5,000 square feet of restaurant space. Out of the 271 apartments, 20% will be reserved for low-income families. Officials hope the tower will reflect the city's diversity and will serve as part of a revitalized and vibrant downtown. I'm Yana Kay for LA This Week.
The tower is scheduled to be completed in 2014 and will create more than 400 jobs. Construction is also underway in the valley for housing to help the homeless population there. It's a project that takes on personal meaning for one council member who's going public about a family member whom he hopes might be able to take advantage of the services. Gil Reyes reports.
Councilman Richard Alarcon has broken ground on affordable housing projects in the past, but this one's different than most. It's being built specifically for homeless adults with mental illness, people like his son.
My son is homeless in the San Fernando Valley. He's diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he refuses services. I don't know whether he's taking his meds or not, because I see him once every few months, and only when I'm passing by a Del Taco or you never know where he's going to pop up. It is the greatest challenge in my life to watch my son struggle. And so I know that these services are necessary.
The councilman encouraging projects like Day Street Apartments. It'll sit on what's now a vacant lot at 7639 Day Street in Sunland, Tujunga. It will have 46 units and, yes, free mental health counseling on site. LA Family Housing makes it possible. In the past year, it's housed several formerly homeless people with mental illness at its new Palo Verde complex in Sun Valley.
And they were able to do that because of our partnerships with the community, because of our service relationships.
So today we welcome this as a tremendously needed service in the Sunland Tujunga community.
Many of the area's homeless have set up encampments at nearby Sunland Park. The problem worsens from the lack of support services in Sunland Tujunga. Despite some objection to the new housing from the neighborhood, Councilman Alarcon hopes it will help people like his son. Expected completion date early next year. In Sunland Tujunga, Gil Reyes for LA This Week.
The $15 million complex will also have free job placement services on site. A friendly game of basketball is always fun, but there's one basketball game that's teaching kids a whole lot about this nation's civil rights movement and how far we've come. Yana Kay explains.
These kids are playing some hoops as part of the MLK Games, a yearly basketball event put on by the Westwood Recreation Center to honor civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr.
I think everyone should be equal because it doesn't matter what color your skin is, it just matters how you act.
Many parents came to support their kids on the court and say basketball is a great way to celebrate a true leader.
Martin Luther King had a dream and it came true, and it came true for everybody in the world. The freedom is just priceless.
Now in its 4th year, the goal of the MLK Games is to inspire friendship among kids by playing basketball. The kids, who come from 18 different parks programs in the city, are separated into teams and play what is known as friendship games.
Oh, they love it. You know, they go around after the game, they wear their T-shirts around. They're really proud to be a part of the program.
The basketball program also teaches kids about the importance of having a dream and going for it.
That you can be somebody if you have a dream. You gotta have a dream. If you don't have a dream, you can't get to nowhere unless you dream.
I feel happy because if Martin Luther King Jr. didn't do that, we would have to sit at the end of the bus.
A friendly game of basketball as the actions of Martin Luther King Jr. continue to inspire decades after his death. I'm Yana Kay for LA This Week.
Century City will soon see a whole new restaurant and shopping district. Residents in one community being urged to join a neighborhood watch, and shelter animals need foster homes. How you can help. These stories and more in City Beat. The Los Angeles City Council has greenlit a $2 billion redevelopment project in Century City. The Century Plaza Hotel will serve as the cornerstone for the 1.5 million square foot mixed-use project. The plan includes restoration of the famed hotel at the intersection of Avenue of the Stars and Constellation Boulevard, as well as the construction of 2 46-story residential towers, a plaza with shops and restaurants, and 2 acres of open space with fountains and walkways. Construction is scheduled to begin next year. The LA City Council unanimously approved interim general manager of the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, Gracie Liu, to be the permanent general manager.
I am trained in nonviolent communication and in transformational mediation, which I think comes in handy when I work with not only within the city but also with our neighbor councils.
Councilman Bernard Parks had high praise for Liu prior to the vote.
She probably ran, along with other city departments, the best elections that we've had in the history of neighborhood councils.
Liu, who has a law degree, has also worked in the field of business entertainment and in the nonprofit sector, specifically working with survivors of domestic violence. The holidays may be over, but theft from vehicles continues to be a big problem in some neighborhoods like Van Nuys. This has prompted the Los Angeles Police Department to advise residents there to join a neighborhood watch group in an attempt to prevent residential burglaries and burglaries from vehicles. Police say by getting to know your neighbors, you will have a better understanding of who and what vehicles belong in the neighborhood and will be able to report suspicious people or vehicles, helping police to stop crimes before they happen. For more information on starting or joining a neighborhood watch in Van Nuys, call the Van Nuys Community Relations Office at 818-374-9409. LA Animal Services needs people willing to offer a foster home to kittens and puppies until they are 8 to 10 weeks old and can be returned to the shelter to be spayed or neutered before being placed in permanent, loving homes. The application to be a pet foster parent takes up to several weeks to process, so the department is encouraging you to sign up now. Animal Services officials say foster care for newborn kittens and puppies greatly ensures their survival rate, as well as their development and health throughout their lives. Kittens and puppies aren't the only ones, though, who need foster care either. To find out more about becoming a foster family for shelter animals, go to laanimalservices.com. Other animals that need foster care include healthy adult animals that just need a break from the shelter, or sick animals that need extra TLC, or even reptiles. Well, we have been reporting on the city's progress and its promise to build 50 new parks here in the city. We take you now to South Los Angeles for the recent unveiling of the new 76th Street Park. This ribbon cutting isn't the first, and it won't be the last. In fact, it was the 5th in what will be a total of 50 ribbon cuttings to unveil new parks in the city of Los Angeles as part of the city's promise to build 50 new parks in the next several years.
This was one of our highest priority locations, so it's one of the first we've gotten done. By next July 1, we'll have 20 parks done and open to the public, and within about a year and a half after that, we'll have over 50 new parks added to the parks that we have in the city of Los Angeles.
To say that the city is in the midst of a parks renaissance is no exaggeration. In fact, the city built dozens of parks in the past few years outside the 50 Parks initiative.
You add that to the 37 parks, there are 38 parks we've opened in the last few years. You'll find in the last 8 years or so, we will have added more than 20% of the number of parks that we've had in this city in the whole 120-year history of the Parks Department.
This commitment to build parks is a way to give formerly blighted and concrete-lined neighborhoods the green space residents have long asked for themselves and for their children. And here in South LA, the need is greater than ever.
Unfortunately, we lead the league in childhood obesity. We also lead the league in asthma, diabetes, a variety of things that all seem to circulate around diet and food-driven kinds of diseases.
But a recent report shows that childhood obesity in Los Angeles is dropping, and city leaders say it's no coincidence. With the opening of each new park, the hope is the children of Los Angeles will skip, slide, and play their way into a healthier lifestyle. There are currently around 430 parks in the city of Los Angeles. And we take you to 2 more park projects aimed at keeping kids of all abilities healthy and active. Here's Rasha Goel.
It's all about parks. This groundbreaking of a park specifically for kids 5 years old and younger at the Richie Valens Recreation Center is just the beginning. The plan calls for creating 39 more tot parks and trails throughout LA County.
What we're doing here is creating a sustainable environment, a sustainable change for our communities to promote physical activity and healthy living.
First 5 LA, whose mission is to oversee the health and safety of children, is working with the LA Department of Recreation and Parks and Shane's Inspiration, a nonprofit group promoting the unity of children of all abilities, to create some of the parks. Another playground being enhanced under the program is the Jamie Beth Slavin Memorial Park in North Hollywood.
This playground was named in honor of a young girl who passed away of Reyes syndrome. Her parents donated this playground equipment.
It will now receive a facelift and be designed with equipment to address the needs of childhood obesity and children living with disabilities.
What these play areas provide is open, accessible, welcoming play facilities for children of all ability levels.
According to officials, lower physical activity is consistently associated with obesity.
This is an opportunity for children to come out of their homes and get involved in exercise and try to reduce their weight.
By promoting physical activity, First 5 LA hopes to see more children maintain a healthy weight and lifestyle. From Los Angeles, I'm Rasha Goel for LA This Week.
First 5 LA has donated $12 million for new construction and revitalization of parks and play spaces in LA County. In this week's list of things to do, researching your genealogy, free family tours at one museum, and a morning hike at Griffith Park. We're only a few weeks into the new year, and that means there's more than 11 months to keep your New Year's resolution to stay active. So why not join some new friends and Ranger Ernie Ibarra at Griffith Park on a 5-mile intermediate level hike on Saturday, February 2nd to Bronson Caves. There will be a very steep climb on the way back from the caves. Meet at the Griffith Observatory parking lot next to the restrooms at 8 a.m. The observatory is located at 2800 East Observatory Avenue. You can find out more details by going to facebook.com/Ranger Ernie. Get tips for a fun family museum visit, explore artworks that are popular with children, and engage in playful observation and discussion in Spanish and English. Whether the art is miniature cars zooming through a futuristic city, a mummy from ancient Egypt, a 340-ton boulder that you can walk under, or animal avatars from ancient Mexico, your family will learn about and experience the best the museum has to offer at LACMA's free family tours. The next one will be held on Saturday, February 2nd at 11 a.m. LACMA is located at 5905 Wilshire Boulevard. The works of art change weekly. The tours are led by museum educators. For more information, go to lacma.org. And have you always been curious about your family's roots? Why not get started on your family's genealogy research at the Central Library downtown? There will be a genealogy librarian available to answer in-person questions at the History and Genealogy Department reference desk on Monday, February 4th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a lunch break from 12:30 to 1:30. In fact, the genealogy librarian is available during those hours on most Mondays and Saturdays. The Central Library is located at 630 West 5th Street downtown. For more info, go to lapl.org. And that's a look at some upcoming things to do. The Campo de Cahuenga Historical Memorial in the Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks held a celebration recently marking the anniversary of the Articles of Capitulation signing, a contract which ended the war between the United States and Mexico. Yana Kay takes us to the festivities.
The firing of this wartime cannon is the highlight of this Campo de Cahuenga celebration, held at the historical location in North Hollywood.
When it went off, I saw like a huge amount of smoke. When I saw the cannon shoot out, there was like a bunch of fire, and me and Daniel thought we were going to die, so we were over there.
These fiesta dancers and this reenactment are also part of the festivities, giving folks a glimpse into California's past. It's the 63rd celebration of the Articles of Capitulation, signed here by Mexico and the United States in 1847, ending the war between the two countries.
Article 5, that in virtue of the aforesaid articles, equal rights and privileges are vouchsafed to every citizen of California.
Those who put on the annual event say this site is significant for several reasons. One being that in 1790, the Pueblo was one of the first buildings to have finished plaster and a red tile roof.
Not only that, the size of the building and the width of the wall suggests that it could have been the first two-story building in California.
The site also served as a Union encampment during the Civil War, one of the many positions held by Union soldiers in Los Angeles to protect California's gold supply from the Confederate Army. Councilmember Tom LaBonge served as the Grand Marshal of the event.
The organization of the Campo de Cahuenga, the historic aspect is so important as we remember our past.
And keeping those memories alive is what these events are all about. I'm Yana Kay for LA This Week.
The Campo de Cahuenga site is open and available for tours. And that's going to do it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ellen Chang. A reminder that you could catch us online at lacityview.org. You can also follow and like us on Facebook. We'll see you back here next week for more of LA This Week.
The average adult spends more than 8 hours in front of the screen each day. Children spend up to 4 hours. Studies show that sedentary lifestyles put you at risk for disease, even at an early age. But a healthy lifestyle is just a click away. Los Angeles Recreation and Parks provides over 16,000 acres of parkland with parks and lakes, swimming pools, golf courses, skate parks, and dog parks, and more than 180 community recreation centers. A healthy lifestyle is just a click away. LAparks.org.
Did you know you or your family may be eligible to receive as much as $5,800 from the federal government? Learn how you can receive free income tax assistance from certified preparers to apply for the Earned Income Tax Credit. For more information, go to Board of Equalization Chairman Jerome Horton's webpage, which can be accessed at boe.ca.gov. The City of Los Angeles encourages you to make your appointment today at 1-323-980-1221.
इस महान शहर में सर्वत्र लॉस एंजलिस के नागरिकों की मदद करने के लिए प्रत्येक पृष्ठभूमि और व्यवसाय से संबंध रखने वाले पुरुष और महिलाएं साथ में मिलकर स्वेच्छा से काम कर रहे हैं। वे मतदान कर्मी हैं। वे चुनाव के दिन मतपत्र वितरित करके प्रश्नों के उत्तर देकर और मतदान की शुरुआत और उसका समापन कराकर मतदाताओं की सहायता करते हैं। वे इसे पैसे के लिए नहीं करते हैं, नहीं, बल्कि दूसरों की मदद करने के लिए ऐसा करते हैं। एक सम्रांत टीम का हिस्सा मतदान कर्मी अगला अमेरिकी नायक बने।
G'day, Troy McCubbin from North Hollywood. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35, our city, our channel.
Okay, can we have quiet, please? Today is Wednesday, January 30th. Welcome to the Los Angeles City Council. My name is Herb West, and I'll be today's presiding officer. The City Council meets every Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 a.m. Mr. Clerk, I believe that I have counted a quorum. I've been wrong before, but I do think I'm right this time. Could you please call the roll?
Alarcon, Buscaino, Englander, Garcetti, Weezer, Corretz, Krikorian, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Zion, Wesson, 10 members present, and a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay. First order of business.
Approval of the minutes.
Garcetti moves, Weezer seconds. Next.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Can we let the past councilman, Mr. Smith, can he move that?
He most certainly may.
So what we'll do, we'll have that moved by Englander, seconded by Buscaino. What's next?
Mr. President, before running through the agenda, there is a request from Building and Safety to receive and file item 1K, inasmuch as the lien has been paid, and continue item 1A to February 27 to work out a payment plan. I've also been informed that item 1I should be received and filed as well.
Okay, without objection.
There's also a request from the Office of Finance to receive and file items 2A and B, inasmuch as the taxpayer has been granted an administrative hearing. Further, there are requests from members to continue items 10 and 11 to February 6. And lastly, on item 37, technical correction should be noted. The correct council file number is 12-0010-sub-8. It is incorrectly noted as sub-2.
Thank you. Okay, so without objection. Okay, can we go through the agenda at this point?
Yes, sir. Mr. President, items 1 through 10 are items noticed for public hearing.
You have cards?
Mr. President, we have cards on items 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Okay, we'll hold those items on the desk. Members, any specials 1 through 10? Okay, let's vote on the remaining. Let's open the roll, Madam Clerk. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Thank you. Next.
And Mr. President, unless reconsidered, the ordinances will go over for a second read in 1 week.
Well, I don't know if we're going to get to 12 today, so we'll just kind of play that by ear.
Very good,
Okay, let's go through the next section. Mr. Englander, you want to hold 13?
Yes, please. Thank you, sir.
Okay. And what?
The items 11 through 24 are items for which public hearings have been held. There are 2 reports on file for item 13. A motion is required, and there's been a request to refer item 15 back to the Housing, Community, and Economic Development Committee.
Okay, without objection. Specials, members? Okay, let's vote on the remaining items. Madam Clerk, open the roll. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
I didn't hear you.
11 ayes.
Yes, Mr. Labange.
Number 24.
Okay, forthwith is the order. Next section.
Items 25 through 38 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, without objection, those items are now before us. Mr. Englander?
31, please, sir.
31 special from Mr. Englander. Members, any other specials? Mr. Weezer?
36.
36 from Mr. Weezer. Members, any other specials? Cards?
Mr. President, we have cards only on item 31.
Okay, so we'll hold that as well. Let's, Mr. Garcetti.
Forthwith, please. Can we do 29 forthwith, please?
As soon as we vote on it.
Oh, sorry. My apologies.
No, but it's a fair request. Let's open the roll. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 eyes.
Okay, where does that bring us now? Mr. Buscaino.
Item 28 forthwith, please.
Okay, and Mr. Garcetti, what was your item again?
29, please.
Okay, 28 and 20.
Mr. President, pardon me, 28 and 29, like item 30, are all ordinances. Those three items have been requested to go forthwith. Without 12 votes sending those ordinances on first consideration, they cannot be sent forthwith.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, it would appear that we have 12 members on the board now, correct?
Yes, sir. If you'd like to reconsider the ordinances, we can do so at this time.
Okay, so let's reconsider all of the ordinances. This vote is for reconsideration of the ordinances.
So, Mr. President, if I may, those would be items 3, 8, 9, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30.
Okay, so let's, we're now voting on reconsideration. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
Okay, now let's actually vote on the items. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
Okay, with that done, Mr. Clerk, the items that were requested to go forthwith will go forthwith.
Very good, and those are 28, 29, and 30. Mr. President, if I may, item 12 is an ordinance that was adopted with 11. I apologize, I did not include that when we reconsidered it. Would you like to do so at this time as well, item 12?
Okay, so let's vote on reconsideration on item 12, you said?
Yes,
Let's
sir.
open the roll. Close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
Now we'll vote on the item. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
12 eyes.
Okay, that brings us where now, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. President, that brings us to item 39. It's an item scheduled for closed session. Would you like to hold it on the desk?
Mr. Krikorian? Okay, then we will hold that item. Okay, that brings us to...
That brings us back to presentation, sir.
Mr. Buscaino, are you ready? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you join me, Cap? Colleague standing to my right is, I like to call her the matriarch of the Los Angeles Police Department Senior Lead Officer Program. Senior Lead Officer from the 77th Street area, Maria Marquez. Let's give her a warm welcome. Maria was born and raised in the city of Los Angeles. She joined the police department and was appointed to the Police Academy in March of 1982 and will officially be retiring tomorrow. Upon completion, she graduated on October 20th, 1982 and was assigned to Wilshire Division on the West Bureau. Officer Marquez worked a variety of assignments during the course of her career, and upon completion of her probationary period in Wilshire Division, she was wheeled out to 77th Street area in South Bureau, where she never left. She spent 29 years at 77th Street area. That's a round of applause in itself. A true testament to Maria's love and passion to serve the South Los Angeles area community. During her time there, she worked as a police officer 2, a police officer 3, a training officer, and now her last rank, a senior lead officer, P3+1. She was the first female police officer to be promoted to the rank of the senior lead officer and served the community in Basic Car 12A 15 for over 25 years. During her time in this position, she was able to effectively provide community-based police training to those officers who worked in her basic car, as well as numerous other officers in the 77th Street area. And I, too, personally benefited from her guidance when I was applying for the Harbor Area Senior Lead Officer. I got in a car with Maria. We were she took me alongside, and it was amazing to see wherever she drove down the streets in 77th Street area, people came out, they knew her by her first name, and that was a testament to Maria's commitment to community-based policing in the city of Los Angeles. In March 1986, Officer Marquez was awarded the Police Star for saving the life of a freeway jumper in her area. As I indicated, tomorrow, January 31st, she will complete her career with the Los Angeles Police Department after 30 years plus of loyal professional service to the community members of the city of Los Angeles. During her well-earned retirement, Maria will continue to reside in San Pedro. And I really, on behalf of the Buscaino and Chandra-Mitaro family, we wish you the best, and we wish you a great retirement. We're proud of you. We love you. And we have a few speakers here that want to say a few words. But if I can get a wide shot, Channel 35, and recognize her brother and sister police officers here, let's give them all a round of applause and a welcome to the John Ferraro Chambers. Maria has had an impact on a number of men and women on the Los Angeles Police Department. A lot of folks have turned to her for guidance and for her mentorship as well. So with us, I want to bring up Captain Arcos, the commanding officer of 77th Street area, to say a few words before we bring up Maria.
Thank you very much, Councilman Buscaino. Mr. President, esteemed council members, on behalf of Deputy Chief Robert Green from Operation South Bureau and the men and women of 77th Street area, thank you for today, for the recognition and the honor of being here before you to recognize someone very special to us, Senior Lead Officer Maria Marquez, and her very well-deserved career ending tomorrow. 25 years of service to our communities, and I know that is something that is near and dear to all of your hearts. And Maria has done that with distinction and with honor and pride, and it's a huge void that she's going to leave with us, but she also leaves a legacy of service, and her peers that are here today stand beside her because of that legacy that she leaves. So thank you very much for recognizing Maria, and Maria, best to you, and you know we're going to be close to you always. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Marcos.
As I indicated, tomorrow is a special day. She'll officially retire after 30-plus years with the LAPD. But for me, Maria, tomorrow is my first year in office, my first official year in office. So it's great to share that as we pass on the baton, and you serving 30-plus years in the city of LA. And we thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Senior Lead Officer Maria Marquez.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for this beautiful award that you're giving me. It's been a long journey for me. I learned a lot. I have no regrets. I would do it all over again. I happen to think I work for the best police department in the world. It's going to be hard to leave because you're kind of like leaving a family, but I know I will survive, because I've been told time and time again that there is life after the LAPD, but I've enjoyed my life here with you, and now I'm going to venture on to find out what else is out there for Maria Marquez. Thank you again, and it's been a pleasure.
Hey, Maria, officer, where'd you go to high school?
Mary Star of the Sea Catholic High School.
Why in San Pedro? Homegrown, what a special. All right, good job, Maria.
Thank you.
Very good.
On behalf of the city of Los Angeles, the mayor, and the entire city council and the city controller, city attorney, Maria, we acknowledge you, and we thank you for your years of service with the Los Angeles Police Department and the city of Los Angeles. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Where do you want to do this? Oh, look at Betsy.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Buscaino, and we hope these distinguished officers visit the Tom Bradley Tower, which recognizes Captain Arcos, take all your team up to the top of the City Hall. You have the greatest badge of any law enforcement agency in the world. Bobby Arcos, All Northern League, Marshall High. Good job, Bobby. All right, Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, it would be appropriate at this time to take item 36, called special for Councilmember Huizar. Item 36.
Item 36, Mr. Huizar.
Yes, Mr. President, I believe a amended motion has been circulated. Let me double check on that. Is that? Can you still hold that on the desk, please?
We'll hold it on the desk. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, that would take us to general public comment.
All right, public comment is now open at this time. Paul Drummond, is that correct, Paul? Paul Dumont? Paul passes. Maria Fisk? Maria Fisk, F-I-S-K, followed by Susan Dumont, pass. Robin Tyler, please come up to the microphone. This is public comment time. Jessica Dumont, thank you. Sharon Cummings, Chair.
These aren't general public comment. These are 31.
Hold on just a second, please. Mr. Clerk has just informed me I have to make a correction. Mr. Clerk, would you just help me for a second? I'm going to ask those speakers to take your seats again. There ain't anything in there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a first in the history of the City Council. There are no general public comment cards. That was item 31 that I called. So I want everybody to give the public a big hand right now for that moment. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Clerk, get me on the right road right here.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, I've been advised by the City Attorney that at this point in time we can now take up items 4, 5, 6, and 7. 4, 5, 6, and 7. There's been a request from member to continue those items to July 30th, 2013. July 30th, 2013, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
And those are all street lighting items as
Yes.
requested. No objection. So ordered. Next item.
Mr. President, that leaves only the community care facilities item and the matter scheduled for closed session.
All right, Mr. Krikorian, I'm going to call on Mr. Krikorian right now. Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We can resolve the closed session matter in open session, but I do need to make a motion with a slight amendment to the matter, to the recommendations that are stated in that matter, the recommendations of the City Attorney. I'd like to move to instruct the City Attorney and the Department of Recreation and Parks to take all necessary steps to effectuate a reimbursement of the general fund for the cost of this settlement if there are surplus proceeds after the sale of the adjacent properties and the construction of the park.
You need a second for that?
I need a second.
Mr. Parks seconded it. Okay.
So if we can vote on that motion, then we could proceed in open session to approve the settlement.
Let's, no speakers on the queue. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
11 ayes. Mr. Krikorian. That passed?
The matter now.
All right, let's proceed with the matter.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, item 39, in the case entitled Bieber versus City of Los Angeles, there is a recommendation to expend $900,000 in settlement.
Okay, that's the recommendation. Any comment on that at all? We're good with it? Good recommendation. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney.
Recommends it, and I vote.
And I vote. I vote. So let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
11 ayes. So ordered. Next item.
Mr. President, that brings us to item 36. A substitute motion for item 36 has been submitted and now before the body for its consideration.
All right, any comment, Mr. Weezer? We're okay with the substitute? So we're okay, it's been circulated, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, sir.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
11 ayes, so ordered. Next item.
Mr. President, that brings us to items 13 and 31, sir.
All right, 13 and 31 together, Mr. Clerk, or is that separate? Together, 13 and 31 are together. I'm going to call on a 10-minute. Hold on just one moment, please. Mr. Wesson.
Yes, Mr. President. I've been informed that I'm conflicted on this issue. I have a source of income that is related, and for that reason, I cannot take action on this item. So I'm going to depend on your judgment and ability to get us through.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wesson.
The name is the Smith Family LLC.
Smith Family LLC. All right, Mr. Wesson is excused from council at this time, so we take him off the boards. Thank you, Mr. Wesson. We have a matter here before us, 13 to 36. That's correct, Mr. Clerk? 1331?
Yes, sir. 13 and 31.
Good. And we did vote on 36.
Yes, sir.
Good. So, Mr. Englander, I'm going to open up a 10-minute on each side, public comment, 1-minute comment. I know there's been public comment in committee, but I think it's for the benefit of the council to hear from the public. Is this all 31?
Mr. President.
Okay. Mr. Englander.
I do appreciate that, and thank you for that. In fact, this has gone through 4 actual committee meetings, but it's actually gone much broader than that over the last several years. So additional public comment is certainly always more welcome. Thank you.
So we're going to do the public comment right now.
Mr. President, before doing so, there is a motion 31A, Englander Labange, that has been circulated and is now before council for consideration.
Great. Do we need to vote on that right now?
No, sir.
No, just hold it right there. So it's technical amendment. So these are people who are for the proposal. And the great thing about our chambers here, there are people on both sides. Everybody can express themselves. Allow them to do that, and then we'll call on the next speaker. And let's all respect each other. Right now, I'd like to call on Tim Doyle, William Doyle, David Garwinkle, Leslie Radford. Excuse me. You want to come forward? Is Tim here? Tim Doyle. All right. There's people I call a second. We'll do a second call on that. David Garwinkle. Is Tim Doyle here? David? Robin Tyler. Hi, Robin. Marina Fisk and Mary Amberlados.
Was your name called?
If you come up and speak, and you have one. Thank you, Sergeant. Will you address it? Please come forward. It's your first time speaking here. Feel free. You got 1 minute to express yourself. Thank you very much.
We get 1 minute, yeah. Okay, am I on? Thank you. Good morning. Maria Fisk from Granada Hills. Here we are again coming together as a city to vote on an incredibly contentious issue. I am asking each and one of you, council members, to consider this before you. Other cities have done this. We have come together as a city to make some rational and sane decisions on an issue that other cities have enacted long ago. This is not discriminatory. This will help people who have been forced to live in group housing situations that have been abused, as well as the neighborhoods. Let me emphasize, this is a win-win for all parties involved, for our city, as well as the people who live inside these facilities. Thank you. I hope we can come together and make a final decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Come to the microphone and state your name, please.
My name is Mary Armenteros. I'm with North Hills West Neighborhood Council. I would like to give my minute to Robin Tyler, if I may.
Well, you can, but someone else will get the next minute. Thank you very much, Mary.
Okay. My name is Robin Tyler. I'm the Vice President of North Hills West Neighborhood Council. The people opposing the CCFO say that it will be bad for seniors, the disabled, vets, sober people, etc. And they say that only wealthy neighborhoods don't want single-family homes being able to offer multiple leases. Well, I live in North Hills West. We are not a wealthy neighborhood, and our council voted for the CCFOs. I am a progressive, I'm a senior, I'm disabled, and I'm sober. Warehousing people by throwing them into single-family homes together and calling them sober living homes and charging them is dehumanizing. Let's talk about the main group behind those who want these supposed sober living homes. First of all, sober living homes, they're not recovery facilities. You don't throw a bunch of people into a home with other people without having a strong recovery program that is overseen by authorities. I have one more minute. Do you think that Impact or any of the other great recovery housing programs are not regulated? Do you think that we in the sober community who have been through recovery are supportive of these houses? This is not about housing the homeless or helping out people who are just out of jail and need a place to stay, and this is certainly not about sobriety. This is about money. This is about greed. You saw what happened when they deregulated the banks and the mortgage companies and Wall Street. They did it in the name of helping people. And how many lives in our economy were destroyed by it? Well, this is no different. Now, I know that many of you on this council... If you could
complete your comment now.
Okay, many of you are liberal, as so am I. However, this is not a liberal issue. This is an issue of dehumanizing human beings by having unregulated facilities.
Thank you very much for that.
That will destroy our community. Thank you.
All right, I'm calling this next name, sir.
My name is David Garfinkel.
Thank you, David.
Right. I'm president of the Tarzana Property Owners Association, and I've come here to strongly support the CCFO. It will clarify vague and outdated provisions that the city currently uses. It's not discriminatory against people with disabilities, and it will provide public safety officials with clearer guidelines for enforcing rules. However, we do strongly urge 3 amendments. One is to retain the requirement for conditional use permits, including public hearings for community care facilities and single-family dwelling zones. The second is to limit the number of parolees and probationers in multi-unit structures. And the third is to adopt some of Chief Beck's excellent recommendations for registration, enforcement, and location density of the facilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Edward Hennington. Constance, I want to pronounce your last name correctly. It's B-O-U-K-I-D, Constance Bokaitis. Edward Hennington, please go forward.
Thank you, Council President. My name is Edward Headington. I'm a lifelong Angelino, a homeowner and a parent. I'm also president of the Granada Hills Newark Neighborhood Council, representing over 30,000 stakeholders. Law enforcement and safety officials need all the tools at their disposal to safeguard our lives and our property, especially when Sacramento is early releasing prisoners. We've had more than our fair share of problem houses just a few blocks from where my family lives, to say nothing of the Northridge murders that shocked a lot of us into action last month. This is a land use and a public safety issue. If we aren't protecting single-family, low-density areas, then why are these zoned as such in the first place? We simply don't have the laws in the books that clearly regulate and define boarding homes, so why not update them now? How many more fires, assaults, and murders do we have to have happen before we actually get serious? There is a cost of doing nothing, and for my family and my community, that cost is too high. We have to update, strengthen, and enforce our laws. I strongly urge the council to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker to approach and state your name.
My name is Constance Bokitas, Land Use Chair of Westwood Neighborhood Council and Comstock Hills Homeowners. I'm here in support of the CCFO as it stands and urge you to vote for the same. On a personal level, I support more stringent regulations prohibiting group housing in single-family zones, regulations which exist in most municipalities that surround Los Angeles. You need to know that even cities such as the People's Republic of Santa Monica and Oakland, both with progressive reputations and stringent rent control ordinances, require CUPs for group homes and prohibit them in R1 zones. LA is way behind the 8 ball on this issue, and it's disgraceful that there's been such inertia here in regulating these homes. The CCFO is not perfect, but I urge you to vote for it. The Westwood Neighborhood Council is on record in support of this ordinance, and I urge you to resist the unmitigated pressure being placed on you to vote against it. Let's impose some sanity on this chaos, and let's not delude ourselves. This is really about moneyed interests exploiting our loose city regulations.
Thank you, Constance. Next I call David Reed of Hollywood, Barbara Brody, if that's correct, Bill Doyle, Tim Doyle. And I see someone walking up right now. You can state your name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Reed. I live in Hollywood. I live immediately adjacent to a sober living facility where we often hear we're here because we're disabled and no law, no regulation can touch us. We hear that all the time. We are in constant communication with the neighbors. 18 people, single family home, $1,000 a month. This house is bringing in $250,000, and the one thing this ordinance doesn't do, the one thing the city hasn't looked at, is licensing these facilities for significant dollars to help pay for the increased policing, to help pay for the building and safety. The house next to us brings in more than $250,000 a year. It's a single-family home, 18 people, $1,000 a month. The city's missing the boat on this, and above all else, needs to consider getting their fair share and cut of it. You can see how they can afford to print T-shirts. There's obviously a lot.
All right,
of money.
now let's thank you very much for your comment. Bill Doyle, Tim Doyle, Barbara Brody. We're calling in Sergeant. Anybody outside on that? Thank you.
Thank you. This is Barbara Brody speaking for Westwood South of Santa Monica Boulevard Homeowners Association and West Side Neighborhood Council, here to speak in favor of the ordinance, strongly in favor of passing something today. We've waited a long time to have some progress on this motion, and it's very important to our communities. This is not the perfect ordinance. We would like to see many, many more regulations, including the inclusion of some of Chief Beck's recommendations. We have an LAUSD elementary school 3 doors down from a sober living home that could now house, when this is passed, 16 parolees. I don't particularly want to be the one to tell that to the school moms. Perhaps some of you can come down and help me do that. It's a balance. You haven't pleased both sides, but we need to move forward. LA needs this greatly, and it is the role of government to protect its citizens, its property owners, and the people who live in those homes. Thank you.
We have a Miss Cummings. There's a Miss Cummings from West Side there. Please. Hold the big clock, please. And for the record, state your name and we'll restart the clock. Thank you.
Hi, Sharon Cummins, Chair, Mar Vista Community Council. 2 years ago, our stakeholders came to us and requested that we work on legislation regarding this particular issue. They still would like regulatory relief, and as I've been pondering this over the past few days, I'm starting to wonder why the word compromise has become such a four-letter word on this issue. There's an easy way, possibly, to phase this law in a fair and equitable manner. Why can't we do a one-year phase-in tied to a zero or low cost reasonable accommodation procedure that is already written into our planning laws. That does a bunch of really good things. It takes away the problems with individual leases and with federal funding because it's a federally mandated procedure. It enforces accountability because it requires findings. It's also quite possibly a shorter enforcement because it's listed as a director's determination. I believe that's a revocation process. That's my idea. Marvista in the middle. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who want to speak in favor of the proposal if I haven't called your name? So, Mr. Clerk, we're going to check the time right now, and then we're going to go those who are against the proposal at this time. I did inform you late, Mr. Clerk, on the clock, so we'll have 10 minutes on this other side. So, Elise Buick. Elise Buick. Proceed. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. Today I stand before you on behalf of a coalition representing almost 200 organizations that includes the United Way, the County Federation of Labor, the CCA, Faith Leaders, the Chamber of Commerce, LA CAN, neighborhood councils including Venice, Griffith Park, and North Hollywood, California State University, Northridge, and LASA, and we are opposed to this ordinance. We agree with Councilmember Englander that we have an issue and many of the supporters, but this is not the way to fix it. This is a flawed policy that affects and limits housing for anyone that is facing a shared housing environment. This includes our low-income poor folks. It includes elderly, formerly homeless, veterans, students, and anyone in a shared housing environment. Why would we want to limit the options for our most vulnerable populations and restrict their residents to downtown South and East LA? Does the council want to send the message that they are only not welcome in their districts? Thank you.
Thank you. You conclude your remarks. Thank you. All right, the next speaker will be Maria Elena Durazo.
Good morning, members of City Council. Maria Elena Durazo with the LA Federation of Labor, representing hundreds of thousands of working families here in the city of Los Angeles. We are deeply concerned about the proposed ordinance, and we encourage you to oppose it. Many working families, especially veterans, would be negatively impacted if it is implemented. We are concerned because veterans who go off and protect our country deserve the ability to be able to come back and pull their lives together. And these places, these homes are one way for them to pull their lives together. They deserve our support and every kind of resource. We also stand strong with the probation officers who oppose this ordinance. And we are proud to be part of this unprecedented partnership of nonprofit organizations, grassroots advocates, business and government leaders. Please vote no on this community care facilities ordinance.
Marquise Harris Dawson. Marquise Harris Dawson, followed by Adam Murray, that's correct. Followed by Beverly Kenworthy. If you could get in the center island, it'll be a little easier.
Good morning, Council. My name is Marquise Harris Dawson. I'm the president of the Community Coalition in South Los Angeles. We represent over 4,000 residents, students, and business owners in that community. We are here today to ask each and every one of the members of the City Council to reject this motion. Our part of the city is impacted by this population, the poor people, seniors who need group housing, veterans, and people coming home for prison and on probation more than any other part of the city. The reality for us is if you enact this motion, what you will do is you will drive the people onto the street. and people will walk our streets and be exposed to arrest and all sorts of other violations, and you will, in fact, increase the problem rather than make the problem better. We know that in the last 24 hours, the federal court ordered the state of California to release 18,000 more prisoners. We know at least 40% of those people will be coming back to Los Angeles, in South Los Angeles. They got to have some place to live. We ask you to vote no.
Thank you very much. Adam Murray. Adam Murray.
Thank you. My name is Adam Murray. I'm here on behalf of Inner City Law Center, where I'm the executive director. You've heard from folks, and we'll continue to hear from folks about the devastating potential impacts of this, or impacts if this passes. I just want to highlight that in addition to being devastating to lots of the communities here in Los Angeles, this is also an illegal ordinance as it's currently proposed. There are 2 lawsuits currently in Southern California addressing very similar ordinances. I have circulated to folks, and I'm happy to provide it to anybody who doesn't have it handy, a 15-page memo from Munger, Tolles, and Olson that lays out a number of the ways that this is illegal. I also have a letter signed by myself and 12 other legal services heads of organizations, including folks who are here today from Beth Zedek, Housing Rights Center, and Disability Rights California, that illustrate the various ways that this ordinance is illegal. We have proposed alternatives to deal with this that focus on residential nuisance enforcement. We do not mean to suggest that there are not problems with bad neighbors in the city. There definitely are, but this is not the proper way to address them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. Beverly Kenworthy.
Beverly Kenworthy with the California Apartment Association, Los Angeles. We represent landlords and property owners of multifamily housing here in Los Angeles. We understand the genesis for this ordinance, but we cannot support it. My legal advisors with the, who represent landlords have told me that this violates fair housing, and that we would have to advise our members that compliance with the zoning code is not a defense against a fair housing claim. There are many issues, and we agree with the larger coalition on all of those issues. In particular, I'd like to point out the parolee probational problem, because it is you cannot practically implement that. There is no way to definitely figure out if someone is on probation or parole. Probation is something that is given by the county and may or may not be part of the court record, which may or may not come up on a background check. Parole is not part of the court record. It happens after sentencing. It happens by a board. So there's no way to even figure that out.
Thank you very much. Tina Hussain, followed by Mike Arnold, followed by Autumn Elliott. Is Tina here? This is not Tina, but I'm a modern man, so...
Guizar?
What's your name?
David Guizar.
Didn't call you, David.
Oh,
thank you. Tina.
I made it. Good morning, members. My name is Tina Hussain with Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm here today to speak on the issue of the Community Care Facilities Ordinance before you for consideration. The Chamber is a strong partner with United Way of Greater Los Angeles on Home for Good, a public-private initiative to end chronic and veteran homelessness in LA County by 2015. Our collective efforts over the last 2 years have resulted in housing over 7,000 formerly chronically homeless and veteran individuals into permanent supportive housing, and we are concerned that the Community Care Facilities Ordinance in its current form endangers our progress in increasing the stock of affordable and permanent supportive housing available for the most vulnerable members of our society. We are also concerned that the implementation of this ordinance could place at risk thousands of people whose options for housing would be reduced and could end up joining thousands of other homeless people on our streets. The LA Chamber understands the importance of solving this issue that is being addressed by the ordinance. However, we encourage further cooperation between proponents and opponents and the City Council to support a future alternative that balances the needs of our neighborhoods and the vulnerable populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Mike Arnold.
Good morning, council members. I'm Mike Arnold, the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. As a context, I just want to remind the city that we have almost 24,000 men, women, and children who are homeless and sleeping in shelters and transitional facilities. 24,000 people who have no home in a city that lacks affordable housing. I completely agree that the city needs to have a policy to deal with problem neighbors. This goes way beyond this. The problem we have is that many of the elements that are therapeutic in shared housing are restricted and eliminated in the proposed ordinance. For example, not having an ability of an agency, Department of Mental Health, a disability service organization, assist and work with folks in housing and obtaining housing in shared housing situations severely limits their opportunities. The definition of a boarding house is overly restrictive. It's much like having a noisy child and eliminating children in the neighborhood.
All right, thank you very much. Now we have Autumn Elliott, followed by Larry Adamson. Larry Adamson.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Autumn Elliott. I'm an associate managing attorney at Disability Rights California. We're the protection and advocacy agency for the state of California. We are here to ask you to vote no on the proposed ordinance because of the impact it will have on people with disabilities, many of whom need to live in shared housing that will be severely restricted by this ordinance. Any version of the ordinance that's before you is going to turn a lot of that shared housing into boarding houses. Boarding houses are prohibited from 90% of the residential area of the city. That's a lot of people with disabilities whose housing suddenly becomes illegal. It's illegal. It's the right thing to voting no is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn. This is the final card of the 10-minute. Larry Adamson, get up there. You got the last shot, Larry.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the City Council. I'm Larry Adamson. I am the Vice Chairman of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, which you know is the joint powers between the city and the county charged with addressing homelessness here in this great city. I'm here to urge you to vote no on the proposed community care, or as I call it, careless facility ordinance currently drafted. We are completely aligned in believing everyone has a right to peace and quiet enjoyment of their residences, but this proposed ordinance creates a real problem for housing. The reality is it's a poorly structured ordinance that will force the closure of multiple small emergency shelters and transitional housing programs that provide crisis housing to adults, family, and children throughout your city, and increase street homelessness. Additionally, under the proposed care ordinance, housing options for homeless children, adults, and families, as well as disabled and low-income residents, will be severely limited. Bad law makes bad policy. Please don't pass this.
Thank you, Mr. Adamson. Thank you very much. So, members of the council, we basically had a 10-minute pro and con. We got a feel. Mr. Clerk, all these cards go on the record. Look at me, Mr. Clerk. All these cards go on the record. Okay. And I'm going to call on Mr. Englander now to speak first. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I want to thank all the members of the public, particularly those both in support and those opposed. This has been an ongoing dialogue for a long time to get here. And, you know, it was actually interesting. In 1973, 40 years ago, the state of California passed the Community Care Facility Ordinance, an act. And under that, and looking very close with what was done by a former legislator, Frank Latterman, under the Latterman Act, which I'm a huge proponent of, and the fact that we've got to have communities live together throughout the city and throughout the state of California. There's been a lot of public outreach and input on this, where this ordinance started off with good intentions, has completely changed, been rewritten and redefined because of the community input, because of all the folks that have had seats at the table and all the discussions and all the opponents that have questioned every single section and ripped it apart. And we've done a pretty good job, and I'm really proud of the staff for doing a great job, quite frankly, to get to where we're at today with that. This is one of the few issues that I've ever seen actually go to every single neighborhood council citywide, and it's been all passed out to all my colleagues, the council members, and matter of public record. but a supermajority of all the neighborhood councils that actually took a position are in support of the current draft and the proposed CCFO, with only a few, very few, less than a handful, I believe, opposing it as well. But more importantly, this is an ordinance that is critically important. One of the things that was stated, or several things that were stated by folks that are concerned, and the list from just the speakers that spoke this morning, were that this will restrict housing, it creates more homelessness, it pushes the problem downtown, it jeopardizes federal money, it eliminates or reduces veteran housing, eliminates or restricts shared housing, closes emergency shelters. In fact, it does just the opposite of all of that. And that's where I think there's been a lot of misinformation, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that has been spread. And so what I would like to do at this time is bring our staff to the table, specifically and only at this point, our planning department. If we can have our general manager of planning, Michael LeGrand, as well as Tom and Alan, join us at the table, and our city attorney Amy Brothers, as well as a representative from the police department and fire department, if you can join the table as well. And before we open it up to discussion, if I could, Mr. Council President,
yes.
Before we open it up to discussion or questions, this is very detailed.
Sergeant, can we get a few more chairs for the police department now to speak at the center table, please? A few more chairs, Sergeant. Mitch.
Thank you very much. There have been a lot of questions from a lot of members of the public, and certainly my colleagues as well. We've had, again, like I said, this has gone through 2 committees. This has gone through a 5-year planning process. It's been a very inclusive process. We've had a number of public hearings, in fact, at Plum and through Public Safety Committee. Just a few weeks ago, we had a 3-hour hearing on this. But I think it's important that we're all here now as a council and the members of the public to hear from our staff, and particularly the planning department and our city attorney's office, on a lot of the statements that have been made, the history of how we got here, where we're at today, a lot of the misconceptions that have been suggested, and walk us through exactly what this will do and won't do as it relates to where the housing is going to be. And so if you could walk us through all of that before we turn it over to our colleagues for specific questions.
All right, let's do Michael LeGrand, the Director of Planning for the City of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Councilmember. Michael LeGrand, Director of Planning. This ordinance is a culmination of over a 5-year planning process. Since the council motion adopted in 2007 by then Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Reyes, there's been extensive public outreach working with all stakeholders to hear their voices and make sure creative solutions for Los Angeles that fit our unique character were adopted. With all the challenging assignments the Planning Department undertakes, this has been a very inclusive process involving all relevant stakeholders. This ordinance has been the subject of numerous public hearings before the Planning Commission, the council subcommittees, as well as numerous community meetings and workshops throughout the city. The challenge is to balance 2 goals. On one hand, ensuring appropriate access to alternative housing arrangements by persons with disabilities and persons with limited means. On the other, protect the character of our single-family neighborhoods and low-density residential neighborhoods, where currently the department has no tools for enforcement when it comes to this issue. The ordinance before you today clarifies existing laws limiting commercial businesses in residential zones. Let me repeat, limiting commercial businesses within our residential zones. In addition, the proposed ordinance significantly expands opportunities for shared housing, including residential facilities licensed by the state of California throughout the city. Deputy Director Alan Bell will now explain why a new ordinance is necessary to address these issues, and then Senior City Planner Tom Rothman will summarize how this ordinance actually works. Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers is also here, who's been working with us very closely since the adoption of this motion to answer any legal questions the council may have.
Good morning, members of the council. I think there are 2 primary reasons why an ordinance of this nature is necessary. The first reason is the City of Los Angeles has yet to enact comprehensive regulations implementing the State of California's Community Care Facilities Act, which was adopted in 1973, over 40 years ago. This important law establishes statewide regulations by providing licensed, compassionate residential care for the elderly, persons with disabilities, youth, and persons with an alcohol or drug addiction. The aim of the Community Care Facilities Act is clear: deinstitutionalization by making sure that these kinds of facilities are properly integrated into neighborhoods. In the absence of a comprehensive city ordinance, it is unclear where community care facilities are permitted, what the process is for establishing these facilities, what the local rules are, and what the standards of operation are. The new ordinance replaces this confusing patchwork with a clear set of land use regulations, permitting procedures, and standards. The second reason why an ordinance of this nature is necessary is that the city has had a long-standing ban on boarding or rooming houses in single-family and residential zones. This ban is part of our general plan. It has been in effect for over 50 years. It is part of the nature of single-family zoning. In a nutshell, a boarding or a rooming house functions the same as a mini apartment building, where each bedroom or guest room is treated the same as a rentable unit and occupied by a separate household. Under today's zoning laws, boarding or rooming houses are permitted by right in all multifamily and commercial zones citywide. And the map that I believe has been passed out to the council members, which I'm holding up right now, shows where boarding houses are permitted citywide within the multifamily and within the residential zones. I believe that this map has been passed out to the council members. Over the years, ad hoc amendments to the city's zoning regulations have really blurred the distinction between what is a family residence on one hand and then what is a boarding or rooming house. The result is that the city is hampered in its ability to determine when a dwelling is being used as a family residence, occupied by a single household, and when it is being marketed as a boarding or rooming house commercial business. The resulting confusion has made enforcement of the city's ban against boarding or rooming houses in low-density zones very challenging. As a result, numerous abuses and violations of the city's zoning laws have not been corrected. In the absence of clear standards and rules, the ability of the city's enforcement agencies to take appropriate action will always be hamstrung. As Tom Rothman will explain, the city's comprehensive new community care facilities ordinance seeks to strike the right balance. It implements the goals of California's Community Care Facilities Act. It promotes small-scaled shared housing, and it clarifies confusing regulations that hamper the city's ability to enforce zoning laws that protect the character of our low-density residential neighborhoods.
Clerk's a little slow.
Tom
Rothman, Planning Department. I'm going to briefly go over the chronology here. This has been, as everybody has said, a 5-year process. It started back in October of 2007 with a motion from Council Member Greg Smith. And then a year later, in July of 2008, the Planning Department, with the assistance of the City Attorney, reported back to Plum on what we could and couldn't do in an ordinance to address these issues. We drafted an ordinance, the Community Care Facilities Ordinance. It went 2 times to the City Planning Commission and was furthered to the Plum Committee back in February of 2011. It was heard 4 times by the Plum Committee and also heard 1 time by the Public Safety Committee. We held over 50 outreach meetings. This ordinance does 3 things. Let's be very clear and quick. The first thing it does is it expands shared housing opportunities and brings the city into compliance with state law. 2, it makes a clear distinction between family residences and boarding house businesses. And lastly, it sets up a conditional use process for parolee and probationer homes. The first thing it does, the expanding shared housing opportunities. Both Alan and Mike stated previously that we are not in compliance with state law, the Community Care Facilities Act of 1973. This now will allow both small and large licensed facilities in all single-family neighborhoods. Small facilities, those housing 6 or fewer residents, by state law are allowed to go anywhere where we allow single-family dwellings. This ordinance does that. It also goes further. It allows the larger ones, the 7s and greaters of licensed facilities, to go into all single-family neighborhoods as long as they meet certain performance standards. Those performance standards talk about parking, access to avoid traffic, noise regulations, maintaining the property's integrity, security, nighttime lighting, no disruption to adjoining properties, and a density requirement of 2 people per bedroom. So that's the first part. That's the licensed facility section. The second point I was making was that it makes a distinction between what is a family residence and what is a boarding house business. As Mr. Bell said before me, boarding houses are currently banned in single-family neighborhoods, and this does not change that. This continues the ban, but makes a clear distinction of what is a family residence and what is a boarding house business. So, small family residences will be allowed up to 3 boarders in low-density residential zones without being considered a boarding house. That's the distinction we are making in this ordinance. Once there's a 4th boarder renting for consideration in a house, it then becomes a boarding house. It is then allowed only in the multifamily and commercial zones. And that, I think, is the biggest point of contention here today and in the previous hearings. And lastly, it does provide a conditional use permit process for parolee probationer homes. Once there's more than 3 parolee probationers in a single-family home or in any dwelling unit, they would need a conditional use permit to operate.
Thank you very much.
Those are the 3 big points.
Okay, we have the police and fire. I don't see the housing department at that table, but would the fire department like to give a perspective, and police department? And I don't know if the housing department is here.
Mr. President, I think there's going to be certain questions for them as well, but if we could, yes, please. And I've got a closing statement before we open it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Yamahata, Chief Deputy, Los Angeles Fire Department. As you're probably well aware of, currently unlicensed group homes do not get fire inspections. In addition, unlicensed group homes have the potential to, life and safety. You have the potential for pack rat conditions, barred windows, locked doors, and so forth. It's the fire department's mission to respond to every incident and provide a service to the city. I believe this ordinance will provide clarity to the city code and allow us to do our job.
Thank you. Chief Albanese.
Good morning, Deputy Chief Albanese, LAPD. You know, for the department, our interest is public safety. In terms of everyone in the community, certainly our obligation is to make sure that we provide for public safety. So I want to say that up front. In terms of current tools for enforcement, they're non-existent or severely limited. And so we believe in terms of the ordinance, it puts some tools in place to allow for us to promote public safety in terms of enforcing those rules that are ultimately decided upon. Also, further, our understanding in terms of non-displacement of those in treatment facilities, the ordinance regulates as it relates to parole and probation. We're in agreement with that. We believe that the CUP will allow for those restrictions to be put in place so that the department can provide much needed input as it relates to making sure that those in those facilities are doing the right thing and are following the rules. And other than that, the department is in support.
Completing your remarks. Now we have the city attorney.
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, and I'm here to answer any legal questions.
Just one legal question. The city attorney's office used to have neighborhood prosecutors. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Were they helpful in this when they used to be in the community?
We still have some. We don't have, obviously, with the budget cuts, we haven't got as many as we used to have. Right. I don't think that's going to answer the same issues that the planning department has just raised with regard to actually making our code more enforceable.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. Mr. Englander.
Yes, thank you very much, and particularly want to thank you all for all the long hours over the years that you've put in working with the community and all the outreach meetings, over 50 community citywide outreach meetings. We've taken a citywide issue and actually established a citywide solution that works. And I appreciate that you addressed every one of the concerns that were brought up by the speakers and that were brought up previously as well, of exactly what this does and what it doesn't do, to lend that clarification. As it was stated, and a number of people have suggested changes, all those changes from eliminating the single lease, which was the number one issue where opponents signed up on this day one. The number one issue of complaint we got on this is gone. We eliminated that. The number of leases is gone. Parking has been enhanced on this as well. Access to all areas of housing and common areas. We've added those definitions that were asked by the opponents as well. Parolee probationers into a unit versus the structures. Shelters being exempt. Domestic violence shelters being exempt. All of those issues that are now wrapped into this are now based on all of those compromises that we suggested. By right in R3 plus zones, which allows now an unlimited number of people in licensed facilities as well. No other city has ever done that. We become the most liberal and available city for housing opportunities than any other city has ever provided in the state of California. We allow licensed facilities through reasonable accommodations, and we have a process for that we've identified to allow that as well. Some people have suggested and are going to discuss the idea of perhaps looking at the enforcement arm of nuisance abatement, of what can we do if we threw some money at the problem and gave additional resources to building and safety. I sort of equate that to, we have a car that is missing its tires, and it would be great to have a better engine that's more fuel efficient, that runs much more efficiently, but it's got no tires. And so that's what this does. This is the backbone. It's the foundation for which any ordinances in terms of compliance and conditions and enforcement rests on, the definitions of the ordinance. What did we do? Prior to this coming through an ordinance, we put together a task force, which is what is being suggested to do now. We did this for 3 years. We brought in building and safety, the Los Angeles Police Department, the fire department, senior lead officers, volunteer surveillance team, county health department, county probation department, planning department, housing department, state legislative offices, the city attorney's office, the district attorney's office, neighborhood councils, homeowner associations, neighborhood watch, and dedicated hundreds of hours of resources to a task force, only to end up where we're at today to say the ordinance is outdated and antiquated, the definitions don't work for enforcement, and therefore, and what's coming out of that now is the opportunity to in fact provide more housing, more shared housing opportunities than ever before. And so I open it up to any questions for this panel, for our staff, by my colleagues, and I truly appreciate you bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. England. Mr. Alarcon.
Council members, this has been a very difficult process because it's a very difficult problem. The fact of the matter is that we have consternated over the issue of nuisance housing for years and years and years, as long as I can remember. We all get the calls about nuisances in our community, and we try to get the different entities of the city to respond. But there's a reason why these problems are difficult to solve. And the reasons quite often have to do with being very careful about trampling on somebody's civil rights. That's why it's so difficult to solve these problems. Anybody who has rented a house or an apartment to somebody knows how difficult it is to get them out of there because they have rights. They're called civil rights and other rights that allow them to do that. And that's why it's so difficult. So, you know, I commend Mr. Englander and prior to him, Mr. Smith, for trying to tackle a problem that truly exists. There's no question about it. We all know it. But we have to be careful on how we pursue it because we don't want to be sued by the federal government. We don't want to be sued by individuals. We don't want to be losing grant funding from the federal government. The fact of the matter is this is a housing issue. The planning department described all the hearings that they had on this matter. Did it ever go to the housing committee? This is a housing issue. It has never gone to my committee, notwithstanding the fact that I requested that this matter be sent to my committee so that I could work on it from a housing perspective. It's one thing for us to look at things from an enforcement perspective. You do what you do. You work with the laws that are before you. But there's a compassionate side of us that says we must balance the two. The need for enforcement, but the need to provide services to our community that so sorely need them. People who are mentally ill, people who are addicted, people who come from every single neighborhood in our community but can't live in that community unless they have these kinds of facilities. So I absolutely...
Hold your applause, please, for all speakers, please. Thank you.
I absolutely want to solve this problem. And I've been committed, I said since I was the only person to vote against this ordinance, I said that I want to work to solve this problem. The fact of the matter is that this particular ordinance has not been considered by any of those committees because it is so dramatically changed from the ordinance that the council voted on, which was heard by those committees. The key component that was changed had to do with devising the law enforcement tactic around the issue of lease agreements versus people. Now, when you start targeting groups of people, you start opening up the issue of civil rights. And so,
all right, conclude your remarks, please.
I'll press my button again, but let me just say this. I do have an amended version of this, 31B. I would ask you to consider it. I would like this matter to go back to the Housing Committee so that I can tweak it, come back, and the motion does two things. Number one, the coalition of folks, including the Chamber of Commerce of Los Angeles, all these groups that support this other version, they agree with this version. But secondly, it creates a nuisance abatement unit that gives planning the ability to go after the bad players. We should not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's deal with the bathwater, but let's not throw the baby out.
Thank you.
So with that, I ask for a second. Mr. Rosendahl has actually seconded my motion, but I'm asking for a second on my motion to send this to Housing and Community Economic Development.
Thank you very much. If you could hold your applause, everybody, just for a moment so we get through the debate. Mr. Rosendahl, veteran.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And many of you know I don't wear my veteran's hat unless I need to. And I need to today. First of all, just to set the record straight, there's 160 different groups who are against this existing suggested ordinance. And of neighborhood councils, there are 20 neighborhood councils who are against it. I'd like everybody to stand up in the room who's against it right now. Stand up. Thank you. Sit down. I need the time to speak. Mr. President, I'd like to request Mercedes Marcus to the table. As the former Assistant Secretary of HUD and the person responsible for housing law enforcement in this nation, I'd also like Mike Arnold to come up as Executive Director of LAHSA, which is the county-city liaison organization for homeless, to come up to the table
All
as
right,
well.
if some of those could do that. And also, I want to ask the people to stand up again as you just did that, Mr. Rosendahl. Those who were against this ordinance, if they could just stand up again. That's all I wanted to see. Please vacate those other seats there.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. Mercedes, let me just start with my first question. Look, I never make a decision until I got all the facts and information. The President should have sent the Secretary of HUD here to answer these questions. They didn't. So what I'm asking you is, you've been in there and you've played a major role for this President in helping us in homeless issues in the district. Frankly, I'm opening up a 124 unit of senior housing in Del Rey, of which 30 of those 124 people will be homeless people processed through the St. Joseph Center. So I have 62 years of age and older. People who gross income is less than 20 grand a year, they're going in the structure. And then 30 people from the back alleys and in the streets who want services that go through St. Joseph will be there. So we'll have permanent services there, and we will have seniors there. 124. But you helped me with that, as well as you've helped us with other projects, as you were a big shot back there. Tell us why we shouldn't vote for it, because I'm as confused as it goes, as Richard is, throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know? And here I know 20 neighborhood councils feel one way. Look, most of my councils are for the ordinance. It's difficult in the 11th district because we want our cake and eat it too on everything, okay? But a homeless person is a human being, and we have to find a way to connect. We're all part of this world. So please, Madam Secretary, former, who's now head of the Housing Authority, tell us what we should do or your insight into this potential legislation.
Before the speaker speaks, Mr. Rosendahl, I want you to push your button again to speak. Thank you. Ms. Marquez.
Good morning. I received a call from Councilman Rosendahl, and I've frankly also received calls from others around the table asking if I would come here today. I speak to you today as someone who, in the Clinton administration, served as Andrew Cuomo's Deputy General Counsel for Civil Rights and Fair Housing. So that means that I was the nation's fair housing attorney in the Clinton administration. And most recently, I served as the Assistant Secretary for Community Planning and Development in the Obama administration, which puts me in a position where when there were fair housing issues at HUD, I was the one who had to advise the Secretary about whether funds should be cut off, because my job there was actually to represent cities. As the Deputy General Counsel, my job was to be the Secretary's lawyer and to look at all of these cases to ensure that all of the evidence fit and to make sure that there was never an abuse. I will tell you that one of the things that is most dangerous as we go forward as civil rights folks is to overstep. It is an important and a very powerful thing to make allegations of discrimination, and they should never be made lightly. They should always be saved for where those things are actual. So in other words, we should never be knee-jerk about those things. Many in the room, advocates who have worked with me over the years, will sometimes tell you that they have disagreed with me when they felt that I should go further than I was willing to go. So here now, I've been asked to talk a little bit about what HUD's perspective might be going forward. So I looked at a couple of things after Mr. Rosendahl called me. One, there's a couple of things we have to understand about the fair housing laws. They don't preempt local legislation on zoning and land use. But they will win the day if there is a problem. They require two things. One, that you don't discriminate against protected classes, which includes on race or ethnicity, on disability, family status, and age. But they also have something unique to federal law, and that is that it has an affirmative requirement to further fair housing. That is different than most of our laws, which simply say what you may not do. The fair housing law has that aspect to it, enforcement, what you may not do, but it also has an affirmative requirement to do things that make opportunity possible. That is akin to our state law on sexual harassment. You know, all of us as city employees, every couple of years, take training on what sexual harassment is in the workplace. That comes as a result of an affirmative requirement in state law to do something to ensure that something doesn't happen before it might. This affirmatively furthering fair housing requirement is similar to that. So it's not just no, it's do something to make something good happen. Okay, so when you look at it that way, there are a couple of things I pulled. One, I don't know if you've seen this, but on January 18th of 2013, HUD and the Department of Justice issued a joint statement about group homes, local land use, and the Fair Housing Act. I guess I would say to you that if I were sitting in your shoes, I wouldn't look at this as a coincidence.
Well, here's the situation. Give us the information that we need as a council.
So,
okay, thank you very much.
Right. So here is We can make it available. It's online. There are 5 pages and 11 questions solely about the issues of group homes, land use, and fair housing. Secondly, there's also been a statement by the Department of Justice and the Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing, John Transvina, who I think it's important to note is a Californian. He is the former president of the Mexican American and Legal Defense and Education Fund here in Los Angeles. He also talks about this affirmative requirement. In these pages are lots of guidance. And I would say to you that despite the fact, here I am, I'm a city employee, the city attorney, they're city employees, but I have to say in this instance that I am not persuaded by what they say. And we're all city employees, and I love my city, and I'm always with you, but as a fair housing lawyer, I'm not persuaded. And the reason that I am not persuaded is that the rules here, as the zoning map that you were showed makes clear, we also did a zoning map. I've given it to you. And it makes clear that by changing the definition so that many more places now qualify as boarding homes, they're limited to about 10% of our area. Then I did something else. It took me less than an hour. You have another map, this one that has the green. This is data that is provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So I mapped their data so that we would have an understanding of what they would see if they called us up. This green information is our map of minority concentration. It tells us the parts of the city that are at least 71% minority concentrated. If you do a simple overlay, you will see that almost all of the areas where the definitions would allow boarding homes are pretty much all within minority concentrated areas. This is what HUD would look at. And this is how the conversation would begin. This is what a regular analyst at HUD would look at on their computer before any detailed work was done.
That's very good. You have that on material, and all the council members have that to see that. And any additional support you could give our office is great. This time, thank you. I'm going to call on Mr. Koretz, followed by Mr. Buscaino.
Well, thank you. And this is a difficult issue for me. I mean, I've been involved with supporting social services, many of the people in this room, for many, many years. I mean, I started out helping Beth Tzedek in the city of West Hollywood in the 80s. We had a lot of difficult issues dealing with housing for people with AIDS and people who didn't want those facilities to be approved next door to them. I've fought a lot of those issues for many, many years. But at the same time, this is not an irrelevant issue. This is something I found when I first ran for city council in this district, going door to door. I would find neighborhoods where every family, especially with children, were all moving out. And as I asked around, it was because it was a problem group home, where people were doing things as outrageous as jumping over the fence from their group home and harassing children living next door playing in their backyards. I mean, I recognize that this is an issue that has to be dealt with. And we can't just say, let's vote no and put it off. I don't think that's appropriate. I think this is an issue we have to address. And certainly my constituents are virtually unanimous in saying, just pass this ordinance. Now, I don't think they're as concerned as they should be about the possible negative repercussions. I commend Mr. Englander. He's worked on this for years, both as a staff person and as a council member. And there have been many issues that have been identified, and he's resolved many of them. He's taken, as far as I can tell, every good suggestion that he's gotten. Now, I don't know whether or not we've resolved all of them. I don't think we have. But it hasn't been for lack of trying, and it hasn't been for lack of cooperation and for lack of effort. If we don't have a better solution than this, I'm willing to vote for it on first reading. But it doesn't mean that I agree that this is it. I think it's an important step because we show we're serious. We are going to resolve this issue one way or another. But at the same time, I wouldn't take a first reading as this is where we finally are. I think there are issues that need to be addressed. There are folks in this room that have assured me they can get together and help us take a next step in the right direction. So don't misinterpret my possible vote on a first reading as I agree with every single element that's here. I think there are problems. I think we can continue to work to resolve them. This doesn't have to come back and be a second reading that's exactly this ordinance. So I will probably vote for it, but I think we need to keep working, keep identifying problems, and bring the best minds in the community and many folks that are here and help us make this a better ordinance. But I don't believe we can just vote against it. I don't believe we can do nothing. This is an issue that we have to resolve to protect our communities.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Mr. Buscaino of the 15th District.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge. I want to take and give a little bit of background and history and perspective coming from my days as a senior lead officer in the Harbor area. I often recall sitting in living rooms, in storefronts, on neighborhood watch groups, business watch groups, where a number of concerned residents were complaining about group homes. And sitting with the residents and business owners, I had to throw my hands up and trying to find some resolution. On the local level, on the ground level, there was no direction at all from the law enforcement side. And to finally come up with some type of direction is refreshing. However, my concern is there are a number of credible programs in my district, from Watts down to San Pedro. And I want to ask the city attorney, if we move forward in this ordinance today, how much of an impact will this have on existing programs? I was told by a number of groups who are here today that nobody has an answer for that. Do we have an answer for that?
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers. I think it's going to depend on the specific situation of each one of those programs. Where are they located? Where are they operating? What is the nature of their operation? Are they licensed? Are they not licensed? I mean, it really is a very individual look.
Case-by-case basis.
Absolutely.
But to know that, you know, in this ordinance you're looking at a conditional use permit for the parole probation homes, you know, for that, it's refreshing to know that. Because what we're finding in my district is these homes popping up left and right and the community not being aware of it. With the conditional use permit, will allow the community to be aware of it and will allow the community to be able to chime in on it. I'll give you a specific situation where across the street from my brother-in-law's house in San Pedro, a group home was established. Not knowing that it was happening, you know, listen, as a police officer, I sat down with the number of drug addicts that I arrested. I sat down with them, I prayed for them, and wished the best for them and provided resources for them. That's the heart behind the badge I'm sharing with you. But this home that appeared in front of my brother-in-law's house was a source of a number of radio calls, to the point where the community, the residents, had to put up a number of cameras to address the quality of life issue. I'll share with you another recent event in San Pedro that illustrates the need for better enforcement. Just last week, a fire in downtown San Pedro, the San Pedro Hotel, injured more than a dozen residents, 40 individuals living in 14 units. This overcrowding contributed to the extent of the injuries. One of the residents is the suspected arsonist. You know, colleagues, it's great to see the amount of groups that are here. We need to hear their concerns and move forward on this. I'm open to you know, being inclusive and being more transparent of the process, but something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Mr. Weezer.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first, I want to thank Mr. Englander for the work he has done on this. He brought to us an issue that really speaks to the quality of life for Angelenos throughout the city. I've been dealing with this for some time in the northern part of my district, and some of my local constituents there have been very concerned about both licensed and unlicensed facilities, and how the state has really preempted local government from working in a lot of these areas and really ties our hands in a lot of instances about what we can do in this area. And he has brought to us an issue I think that does need to be addressed. However, I cannot and I do not support the proposal as it currently stands. We have a very fragile housing supply in the city of Los Angeles. It's under great demand. There's demand both for market rate housing and affordable housing throughout the city. I do believe this may make that situation worse. But not only that, we have a very fragile infrastructure in our Skid Row area, where I think that will now be under greater demand should this go forward. It is overburdened, needs a lot more support, and I could foresee that a number of individuals who need this type of support will now go to Skid Row and overburden an already overburdened area and support system. On top of that, hearing some of the issues by Mercedes on potential litigation, hearing that potentially some populations such as students and people who are just making ends meet may be affected by this. I'm concerned if we should move forward, but I do want us to continue working on this. We have to find a solution, but at the end of the day, there's some issues in this city that sometimes we would much rather just look away and pretend they're not there. This is one of those that I commend Mr. Englander for addressing, no matter what the outcome is here. But I would hope that we move in a direction that speaks to what we really need in this city, which is permanent supportive housing throughout the county of Los Angeles. That's the direction we should be going. Experts after expert has told us that supporting the homeless population in the area is to go in that direction, and that's really what we should be working towards to, and not doing the opposite of that, which is to continue to concentrate them in certain parts of the city. Thank you.
Mr. Huidar, thank you. Mr. Zine of the 3rd District.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge. I want to also acknowledge Mr. Englander for his dedication, also Mr. Smith, who's here today, former council member, for their passion to try and do something to address the issue. The constant theme you've been hearing is something needs to be done. And I think everyone in this room will agree something needs to be done. But how do we do it in a manner that is sensitive to the needs of the people of Los Angeles? If you go up Spring Street, a couple blocks from here, you'll see a homeless encampment on Spring Street as you approach City Hall. If you travel around the city, you'll see homeless because people don't have a place to live. And I come from law enforcement, like many of my colleagues, to say how do we show compassion and restraint at the same time maintain protection in neighborhoods so that people can live in tranquility, as my colleague said in San Pedro, where they had to put up cameras because they had some negative situations. And I spoke to Mr. Alarcon about the enforcement aspect. And it's interesting when I talk about enforcement aspect, I didn't want to mention something that's in today's paper. California unable to disarm 19,700 felons and mentally ill people. People who have guns that shouldn't have guns. They can't even enforce that. The question is, how do we come up with something that's logical, that's reasonable, that's prudent, that's not going to put more people on the street? We have enough people on the street. We're doing a count now to find them in the street. There's too many on the street. But at the same time, we need to protect neighborhoods. And the constant theme I'm hearing over and over and over is something needs to be done. Now, Mercedes, you have a lot of experience in this. You've worked here. You've been to Washington. You know the situation nationwide. We need to pull the folks together, the planning, the police department, the fire department. We need to do something that's going to work. And we can pass every law in the books. The problem is there are people who aren't complying. Mr. Englander's district, he had 4 people shot and murdered at a place that was unlicensed. That created an outrage in that community. That was a crime. It's not because people were living there, it's because a crime committed. And unfortunately, they had no licensing, they had no responsibility to do what they did, and 4 dead people. That's a tragedy. But I'm not going to say the housing contributed to that, a crime contributed to that. But how do we then differentiate? How do we come up with a plan that's going to be fair and equitable and not have a disproportionate number of folks in one part of the city and not another part of the city and spread it out? I mean, no one wants to live next to a criminal who may go out and harm you or your family. No one wants that. But we have to also understand that people sometimes want to rehabilitate and come back in mainstream society. And that's what we need to help. And that's what we need to help a lot with. So I like my colleagues here and you experts and the folks that are here that are concerned about how do we have housing. The housing is a concern. The Apartment Owners Association doesn't support it because they've got concerns about it. There's a lot of issues, a lot of concerns, and it's been like 6 years, and we still don't have an answer. And I don't want to wait 6 more years and keep things in limbo and have more of the situation that's being unaddressed. Whatever department you're going to go to, they don't have the resources to address it. They don't have the resources to address to make sure we get compliance. So again, pass all these laws, make everything on the books sound good, but who's going to go out there and do it? The police department can't do it. They don't have the resources. Building safety can't do it. So who is going to do it? And how are we going to structure something that's going to be fair for those that need that in-term residential care? And how are we going to maintain it for the city of Los Angeles?
Thank you, Mr. Zion.
I just want to conclude with one statement. We got a diverse population in this city. We need to be sensitive to that diverse population, and I'm not in favor of putting more people on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bernard Parks of the 8th District.
Thank you very much. One thing in reading all this material, in concept, I think most of us agree that there's a need of resolving it. In my district, we certainly have a concern about single-family residences, but we also have a concern that we're the second largest number of homeless people in the city. And we've been working for years to get people off the street, and some of them have gone into a variety of these types of facilities. What I think, in looking at it, it looks like we've cut off too broad of an area in identifying the problem. It looks like we need to zero in on the bad businesses that are not complying. Please don't do that, because I'm going to say something you don't agree with. So just let me finish. So we need to do something to narrowly conform to bad businesses. It would appear that because they're businesses, we could create a registry if we made them all have a business license. Then we know who they are, and part of the business license, I would assume, would require that we know that they are registered with the state. So that would be a major benefit to know where they are, where they're located, and which ones we believe are good businesses. And then I think in looking at some of the issues that we're concerned about is that I don't think we benefit by throwing every business that's functioning in the same barrel and saying, here are some new rules that may not be able to be complied with. I think there's some legitimate concerns when places are come about with no warning to the public. You wake up one morning and you have 15 people living next to you that used to have 2, and then you have all the concerns about parking and a variety of other things. Those things need to be addressed. I don't think we can address them necessarily by an ordinance. I think we need to have a task force that includes city, county, state, that can sit down and figure out what are all the elements that we're dealing with, because when we deal with problems of this magnitude, we just can't write a piece of paper, sign it, and it all of a sudden resolves itself. At some point, we're also going to have to put money behind the enforcement element, because if we don't put money behind it, it's again just a false piece of paper. Because I don't get a sense from talking to my community that they're generally opposed to these kinds of care homes. They're opposed to those that don't operate properly. And I think that's what we need to concentrate on as opposed to a broad blanket. And I think when we talk about the prison realignment, the homelessness, mentally ill, we have more than our share in the 8th District. And again, we have put a great deal of effort to find housing for them. We'd hate to see all that unravel and find them now on the street where there is no care, wraparound service, or anything else. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done. Appreciate bringing it to everyone's attention. Appreciate the fact that it is in concept what we should be doing as a city. But I don't think any one department, any one person can solve this. It's a matter of collectively the city family, the county family, the state family's got to get in a room and figure out where all the pieces go. And I think in closing, we need to also determine, and Mercedes, you'd have a better handle than I think anyone else, what are other cities doing about this? Do we have a comparative analysis to determine that somebody doing something that actually works, that we don't have to pilot or come and have false steps as we move forward? But those are my concerns. I think in concept, I agree wholeheartedly, but operationally, I think we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Mr. Krikorian.
Did you want an answer to that, Mr. Parks?
Yeah,
I think.
Well, ask the
Marquez
question
was gonna
again. That's
answer.
what you get asked.
Do you want to provide an answer before
I would say that how we define the problem or the issues leads to what we look at about different cities. Zoning and land use is just one perspective on this issue. There's also the issue of services. There's a national shared housing alliance that is looking nationally at how best to deal with the populations that we have. Our homeless population, 14% of our homeless population is veterans, for instance, right? We have to look at who we are, who we're trying to house. We have an enormous growing number of seniors that are going to need housing because they're low income, because they have cognitive issues. We're going to be able to support nonprofits who have to help them get into housing. Wounded warriors with cognitive disabilities cannot rent a home themselves. They need help to do that. So we have to understand first what problem, who is our population, and that all of the different solutions, it's multifaceted. It is not just enforcement, it is not just zoning, it's also services and programming.
Well, I think what this question was is you look nationally, statewide, and also locally. What's Long Beach doing? What are some of the other smaller cities, Pasadena, whatever, doing? Mr. Kokoria now to be called on formally. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And first, I want to thank everybody for coming down and being part of a really important, substantive policy discussion. You know, I think often government at every level, and certainly this council, is sometimes accused by commentators out there of avoiding difficult policy issues and only dealing with the fluff. Well, this is about as difficult and challenging a policy issue as there is. And Mr. Englander and Mr. Smith before him have been willing to step up to the plate and take it on. And I think that's important. But as Mr. Alarcon mentioned earlier, there's a reason that this is a hard issue. It's because there are very real concerns about the quality and integrity and nature of our neighborhoods and our zoning, our ability to use our zoning law to maintain neighborhoods, while at the same time the very real civil rights issues and housing issues that have been described so eloquently by so many people today. I think the important thing is that when we address certainly homelessness and the broader range of housing issues, the only way to be effective in doing that is to develop broad consensus and to work across barriers of government, as Mr. Parks said, to deal with it with multiple agencies at the same time, but also with the support of people in our neighborhoods throughout Los Angeles to address this challenge. And I know in my district we've done that very effectively by bringing people into the same room and talking about how we do this, how we increase the stock of permanent supportive housing in the city, which is the single most important step that we can take, I think, in addressing housing. We have to do that by consensus. We have almost 500 people probably in this room today talking about this issue. And the two principal things that I've heard, and I hope everybody else in here has heard, is that we have people in neighborhoods very legitimately concerned about their neighborhoods being damaged by nuisances and by other inappropriate use of housing in their neighborhood. And at the same time, we have people here who are saying, yes, we get that, but there's ways that we can address that while still increasing the housing stock for people who need it, increasing the opportunity for shared housing, increasing our ability to distinguish between boarding home businesses and real shared housing that addresses our neighborhood, our communities in need. Let's continue that kind of positive discourse. Avoid demonization here, because I don't think there's any reason for that. I think we have the basis for a worthy discussion of real practical solutions here that will address both of those sides of the concerns. But I still continue to have some questions about this, which I don't think I've been able to adequately address yet, particularly with regard to probationers and parolees. which are a significant concern of mine. I've had, as we've all had, terrible situations where you have a concentration of released felons, including an accumulation of sex offenders in one house, right across from a daycare center, and a neighborhood left with very little to be able to do about it. And we can't have that. We have to drive a solution to those kinds of problems. At the same time, I don't think there's a person in this room who would think that we should put homeless or disabled veterans out on the streets. So, we can get there with this kind of discussion that we've had today and that I've heard around this horseshoe, but I don't think we're there yet today. And I think we need to find, Mr. President, an opportunity to be able to use Mr. Englander's infrastructure, if you will, this very important piece of policy work that's been in development for 5 years, gone through all these hearings, had this tremendous input from our staff over all these years, take that infrastructure and try to address some of these discrete problems, I shouldn't say problem, but questions that people have raised, try to find ways that we can address the specific concerns that many people have raised, for example, about the inability to identify who is a probationer or parolee by some of our landlords. That's a real issue that we're going to have to address. There are practical solutions that we can find to that, but we're not going to find it here today. And so my suggestion, Mr. President, would be that we, continue this discussion on, continue to work in a positive way with the people in this room as stakeholders in the output of this, and try to develop a response based on Mr. Englander's infrastructure, but with some of these problems.
Thank you, Mr. Kokort. I got an idea. We'll hear it later. Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you very much. And many of you know it's hard for me to sit down, stand up, and go through this, as many people with cancer can admit to that it's a problem. But let me just say, Bernard Parks, when I'm madly in love with him, I call him Mr. B. Thank you, Mr. B, for what you said today. Give Bernard Parks a round of applause. And as for Mitch Englander, my seatmate was Greg Smith. I've been involved in this issue for 7.5 years. It's a big deal. And he was his deputy, and now he's the councilman. And Greg and I just hugged a few minutes ago. Bottom line is, it ain't easy to come up with a solution on this issue. We know that. I'd like Mike Arnold to tell us what his job is, what he's been doing, and what it means, so that people in the council can understand the professionals have been dealing with this and their suggested strategy. Quickly do it so I can make a closing comment.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosendahl. I'm Mike Arnold, the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, and we're charged as a joint powers authority to work with the city and the county to find solutions to homelessness. The number one solution is access to housing, particularly affordable housing. The number one people don't have housing is because they can't afford it. Shared housing on a national scale is becoming a prime solution. Housing first, the process of getting into permanent housing and then wrapping services around them is a national best practice around dealing with chronic homelessness. The challenges that we have is that the ordinance as currently proposed interferes with our ability to employ best practices and would likely significantly increase the cost to the city of actually dealing with and trying to get homeless people housed. Based on our analysis, we have identified over 600 emergency shelter beds that would be deemed illegal under the definition of a boarding house. And I want to call out, there's a lot of confusion. 95% of the homeless programs don't qualify for licensure under state law. It requires a level of care and supervision that people who are homeless don't need. So relying on licensure to protect these programs is not accurate. I just want to call that out.
Okay. I will wrap it up right now and say this. Colleagues, it's a pleasure to interact like this. This is democracy at its best. Obviously, it needs to go back, and I'd like it to go to the Housing Committee because that's their responsibility. If it wants to go to public safety, fine. Public safety is an issue. Frankly, I have group houses that are nuisances that I am dealing with, and therefore I agree we got to deal with these nuisance houses. But I also know a lot of programs, like when I put this on again, New Directions, which is here in the room. Just a quick story. In Del Rey, I opened up a house for transitional use for Iraq and Afghan vets. The guys who come back from war who don't even want to see family yet because they've been through hell and back half a dozen times. Okay? And when I first opened the house, the community, the R1 neighborhood, was furious, wanted to kill me about it. A year later, a little old lady comes up to me and she says, you know, I banged on their door and I brought in a plate of homemade cookies. And the guy in the house gave me a painting he just did. Well, that was the beginning of that neighborhood beginning to realize they were part of the solution for these young men and women who are in 2 wars right now that are the worst we've ever had in our history. The worst. And as a psychiatric social worker who dealt with Vietnam vets coming back, I can tell you what war does to people's heads. It's not like a light switch you turn on and turn off. It's something you got to deal with, you got to figure out. Killing somebody, seeing your buddy get killed, I mean, this is heavy stuff. We still don't even know what happened in Iraq, how many people we killed. That we're insane. But these soldiers who put their lives on the line, they got to be given this support. So the 3rd year I went back to that event there in the community, you know, I sat with these guys. The place was packed. Everybody loved everybody. And this one guy started to cry, and he said, you know, I just want to tell you, I haven't seen my mother yet. I haven't seen my family yet. I'm just trying to compose myself to get back into the world. I looked at him, and I gave him a big hug. But the beauty was the community embraced them. You get rid of fear and ignorance, people will move together as a family.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Alacone. Mr. Richard Alacone. Thank you for being a veteran, Mr. Rosendahl. Give him another hand.
Thank you. I hope you were holding my time. We've had a lot of good discussion here. The bottom line is that I do not believe this ordinance is ready for prime time. I've submitted an alternative, but frankly, I would like to ferret out its issues and concerns, and especially would like to present a model for a nuisance abatement program that specifically targets group homes. And by the way, I want to thank the United Way for, I have a letter from them that I received that commits to providing a partnership with the City of Los Angeles on the nuisance abatement program so that it will not cost the city as much as to implement. There are some very good things that we are trying to do to improve our communities, and clearly, you know, this is one that we have to address. And so I hope that we can continue this with some aggressiveness to solve this problem. I believe it can be solved, and I believe my motion goes a long way to solve it and create a united front on both sides of the issue to come together to agree that we can do this. There's a couple of poison pills, if you will, in the Englander version. I believe the city attorney, when they came back with the ordinance, came back with something that does create very bad circumstances. So, for example, and these are practical issues. If you're an owner of an apartment building, let's say you have 20 units out there, and you didn't know, but 3 of them are parolees. Then you have this other tenant who really wants to stick you for something that you did to them or something. And they know about the 3 parolees, but you didn't know. And so they file a complaint saying you don't have a conditional use for these parolees. Now, what's the owner supposed to do? Kick the people out, which would subject them to civil rights violations, or go through a conditional use process, which would cost them tens of thousands of dollars. And when you think that in many of these areas, in my district, in North Hills, you know, just about every apartment building has 3 parolees in it. And yeah, we got to grapple with that problem. Our police officers do every day. I can think of one building in particular where there's probably 24 parolees in it that we have to deal with on a regular basis. But do we want to put all the apartment owners that have parolees in them, subject them to a conditional use process that's going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars? I don't think that's what we want to do. And particularly when they're not doing anything wrong right now. The parolees aren't doing anything wrong, and the owners are not doing anything wrong by having them there. We applaud them for providing that kind of housing. So there's a lot of issues that have to be worked out. But the worst thing that we could do is pass an ordinance that does not ferret out these problems and subject the city to loss of federal funding or civil rights lawsuits. And because of that, I would hope that we take whatever time is necessary. Yes, it's taken 7 years, but there's no magic to the time frame. The magic is in solving the problem. This ordinance doesn't solve it, even though it's 7.5 years. Let's come back with something that does. Now, when I first voted on this, I was alone in this vote. I'm sensing that there is a majority of folks that actually want to provide a better product, and hopefully that majority will demonstrate, will create the incentive to crank out an ordinance that will really work for all the people that will be affected by it. Yes, we want to solve the nuisance problems in our community, but let's not create a greater nuisance problem in the form of loss of federal funding, loss of services, and potential lawsuits that could reduce, they have the effect of reducing our city budget and cutting even further into the safety services that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Alicorn. Mr. Krikorian of the 2nd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just 2 quick points I forgot to mention earlier. One is one of the significant concerns I had that was raised by some of the folks here was impact on domestic violence shelters, and particularly the very confidential domestic violence shelters, which are so essential to providing refuge to victims of that violence. I've introduced a motion today, and thank Mr. Englander for seconding that motion to allow domestic violence shelters by right throughout the city of Los Angeles in all zones everywhere in Los Angeles. So that hopefully will address that, and I'd ask for your support of it. Also, just because there's been some discussion about potential liability here today and impact on federal funding. So as the Budget and Finance Chair, I just want to emphasize to everyone here who's came down here to support this measure today, it's really important that we make sure that we get this right. Because any impact at this point, with the city facing the budget deficit that we're facing right now, any impact on any source of funding that the city may have would be a very, very serious problem for the city. It would be a very, very serious detriment to our ability to provide the kinds of quality of life that we want in our neighborhoods. So on that basis alone, I think it's important that we take a deep breath, continue to work on this and try to resolve some of these issues so that we can have a very high level of certainty that some of these liability issues will not have adverse impact on the city.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Mr. Englander to close the comments, and I do have an idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, then I'll listen to I'll go ahead and listen to your idea before I close. Then, if I could do that.
This has been a great conversation. And Mr. Alicorn, your passion, Mr. Rosendahl, all the others, Mr. Parks, Mr. Krikorian, everyone, Mr. Koretz, Mr. Englander tried to do this with Mr. Smith. What I would like to do, and you too, Joe, what I'd like to do too is get a working group of the chairman of the public safety, planning, and housing, which is so important because that was an element that you spoke of, Mr. Alicorn, together with our city attorney's office for guidance and the CLA, in addition to building and safety and planning department, as well as the Department of Housing, in a working group to report back in 90 days, to take all these motions together, to have some discussion that comes back that we could listen to the people throughout the city, from San Pedro to Chatsworth, from Boyle Heights to Venice, and find a solution. So we'll second that. Mr. City Attorney, that's a verbal motion. Is that okay, Mr. City Attorney? Thank you. I'm going to hand a written of my verbality, if that's the right word, Madam City Attorney. Okay. Mr. Clerk, I'm handing this to you. Mr. Englander to close.
Thank you very much. A couple of things, and some of the things that were addressed in terms of the comments earlier about parolees, probationers, living in apartments. We've addressed that. In fact, that's not at all what the ordinance says, but I won't go into all the details about that. But all those protections are in place to allow it. We've worked with, like, the Apartment Owners Association. They said per unit instead of structure. We've done all those things and hammered those details out. So clearly not everybody has read the entire proposed ordinance. But in any event, let me just speak to where this came from, if I could. I have children of my own. And when I ask them to clean their room, they usually do it. They're good kids. And then I go in and I open the closet, and oftentimes everything will then fall out. Solving our homeless problem and ensuring we've got affordable and shared housing is not warehousing people throughout the city of Los Angeles. These folks, quite often, and I'm not talking about the ones that are here today, God bless you. I'm talking about the most vulnerable in society that are living in horrible, deplorable, unsafe, and unsanitary conditions. When you shove 30 people into a garage with no running water and no bathroom facilities, that's not solving a problem. And they're all over the city in every community. I'm not talking about the issues that were all brought up with veterans and the disabled, or any of the housing laws or the issues of the federal government. In fact, we address all those and welcome them and provide more opportunities for that, which is critically important. Most people don't know my life story, but I was one of those, and my family was homeless, and we lost our house. I know what it is to go through that. My father was a 100% disabled veteran. My uncle, after he lost his house, was killed by 3 gangbangers. I know. That's why I'm here, to help and make a difference. I sit on the boards of a dozen nonprofit organizations. We have group homes on those boards with New Horizons and many others. My sister lived in a group home because she was a school teacher and went to the hospital. They couldn't get to her in time because they locked the doors. She stopped breathing and she had permanent brain damage. I took care of her for 10 years and she died in my arms. I know what's out there in housing firsthand. We're not trying to solve a problem by creating another. I believe in a holistic approach. I believe in bringing people together. This is a huge problem that we face with, and we can't say we're solving problems by warehousing them. Yes, we had 4 people killed in my district just a few weeks ago that were shot and assassinated in front of an unlicensed, unregulated facility that was deplorable conditions with rotting food and vermin and feces all over the house. You couldn't fathom living there. Children living in closets. I support the idea of a working group, and I appreciate that, Mr. LaBonge, a true leader of the city. Thank you for suggesting that. And I will support that because I want to move forward. I think we need to bring people into the discussion that can actually read what we're proposing and sit down and create and craft and improve legislation. I believe Mr. Alarcon is right. It doesn't matter how long you take, although I'm not pushing this off. I think 90 days is very reasonable to do that. So I would ask for an aye vote on that. I would ask that we take that item first, Mr. President.
Well, if there's no objection, I'm going to just order it as the council president.
Okay, and with that, though, we do have one other ordinance then right behind it, which is the amendment proposed under 31B. I would ask that we vote that down if we're going to vote up 31C, if you will, first. And being so, because that's not just a matter of sending this ordinance to another committee. It actually guts it and changes it, and there's many modifications that have not been vetted. And so the idea of sending this to then the working group in its whole form now, and including then who you suggested, I would support.
I understand that, but I think based on my knowledge, based on consulting with the city attorney, if I just order the whole thing to the working group, as opposed to voting on anything, because we want to make sure we get it right.
Yes.
And so I think it'd be easier. So if there's no objection, members, I'm going to order it to the working group and report back in 90 days. So there's no objection, so I just ordered that. So I want to thank those at the center table. Mitch Englander, I want to thank you for your leadership. All members, Mr. Weezar.
Mr. President, I fully support that, but just procedurally, I just want to make sure we are following the correct procedure here. Mr. City Attorney, I do believe we need an actual vote of some kind to send that to the working group?
Basically, in essence, it was an amending motion, and which was seconded, and it was without objection means it's a unanimous vote. So if somebody objects, then you don't need to vote.
Mr. LaBonge, I love you, but I don't think a president in these chambers could just order something to happen. I just want to make sure it's...
I just want to let you know for the record,
Thank you very
no
much.
guy from Salesian High could take on a guy from Marshall High and win. All right. I love you, Jose. All right, this is very good. This has been a very good discussion, members. We got a work cut out for us. What's the next in front of us? Thank you, Senator Table. Thank you, all our guests here today from throughout Los Angeles. Please exit quietly.
Mr. President, we've had a request to reconsider items 1B, 1H, and 1L. Again, 1B, 1H, and 1L.
1B, 1H, and 1L for reconsideration. So open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
10 ayes. Sergeants, will you get a little order in there, Sergeants?
And, Mr. President, there's been a request to continue those items, 1B, 1H, and 1L, to February 5th.
February 5th, with no objections, so ordered. Next item.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
So ordered.
The desk is clear.
Desk clear. Members, any announcements? Members, any adjourning motions? Hold on just a second, Joe. We're going to get organized here.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. She's here. I want to give it to her, but I want.
Knock it out.
Bill had to leave.
I know.
So here's the other half of what Bill was going to say. If you want to.
All right, let's all rise for adjourning motions right now.
I'll knock it out really quick.
Sergeant, if you could hand on the back of the chambers, I appreciate it. If you could stand for adjourning motions. This time we recognize great people of our city and our community.
And this one was a city family member.
Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge. Colleagues, I, along with Council Member Rosendahl, ask that we adjourn today in memory of Edward Leon Jr., a longtime city employee and member of the Public Works family who passed away December 23rd, 2012, this last year. Edward was born in Detroit, Michigan on September 21st, 1927. He was one of 4 children of Japanese and Cherokee Indian descent. He had a younger brother, Kenneth, an older sister, Dolores, and a younger sister, Audrey. Before Ed began his career in the city, he served in the United States Navy during World War II and as an electrical technician. He was stationed in San Diego on the USS Prairie, and his primary occupation involved the transport of crews to anchored submarines and installing necessary electrical paneling. Edward Leon Jr. began his city service on January 24, 1950, as a drafting aide with the DWP. During his 38 years with the DWP, Ed worked as a civil engineering drafting technician for 5 years, after which he was promoted to civil engineering assistant and served there for the next 32 years. In 1988, Ed joined the Bureau of Contract Administration as a construction inspector and remained with them for 24 years until his passing on December 23rd. During his time with the Bureau of Contract Administration, Ed worked on a variety of projects, including sewers, B permits, and materials control, and also worked as a project coordinator for several years. The majority of his time and last assignment with Con Ed was spent working on AU, E, and S permits in the West Los Angeles office. Edward's supervisors over the years commented that his positive personality made him successful in dealing with the public and contractors. His willingness to take on new challenges was always an asset to the Bureau. He worked well independently, and as a team member, he never hesitated to assist his fellow inspectors and was skilled at problem solving. Throughout all of his years of service, he adapted well to the changes and mastered the new automated permit system in 2001. Ed was 85 years old, and he was 1 month shy of serving the city of Los Angeles for 63 years. God bless him. In fact, he holds the record for the longest serving city employee. In all of his years of service, Ed never took any sick days. Now, that's hard to believe, not one sick day. He became a member of the 800-plus sick hours club in 1997 and remained in this club until his passing. God bless him. Spending this much time with the City of LA, it's no surprise that Ed received numerous awards and commendations for attendance. He loved working for the city and was proud to be employed for such a long period of time. His passion for traveling, and he was able to visit Asia, Australia, Europe, and a multitude of other countries around the world. He spread his passion to his family and encouraged his daughters and grandchildren to travel as well. He had an affinity to the ocean and loved to swim and body surf when he had time. Ed is survived by his loving wife, Iris, 2 daughters, Lori and Wendy, his sister Audrey, 2 granddaughters, a great-grandson, and a great-granddaughter. Colleagues, what an amazing, incredible city employee from the Public Works family. Edward Leon Jr., may he rest in peace. Thank you.
May he rest in peace. Members, every day is a blessing. Let's go ahead and serve the city of Los Angeles. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.